StraighTAllDay.com.
How we kill, kill and completely eliminate the nasty habit of passive aggressiveness. How do we get rid of passive aggression? Now, according to Wikipedia, let's get a definition of what passive aggressive behavior is. It is characterized by a pattern of passive hostility and avoidance of direct communication. Inaction, where some action is solely customary, is a typical passive aggressive strategy. In other words, to not do something where it's normal to actually do something, like showing up late for a function or staying silent when someone expects a response, or you hold the door open for somebody, they walk through the door and don't even acknowledge that you held the door open for them. That can be looked at as passive aggression. It is typically used to avoid confrontation, rejection, or criticism. Passive aggressive behavior is sometimes protested by associates, evoking exasperation or confusion. This is something we're going to talk about here today. People who are recipients of passive aggressive behavior may experience anxiety due to the discordance between what they perceive and what the perpetrator is actually saying, doing, or otherwise communicating. Now, some of that I'm paraphrasing, but I'm grabbing this from Wikipedia. Now, what I'm about to begin here today is a 4-part series on how to eliminate passive aggressiveness and how I'm going to, or let's just call it passive aggression. And I'm going to explain some ways that I notice passive aggression in people. Generally, when I made these points, what I'm going to explain here in this series is based on where I see it in men, but this can apply to women as well. And often I'll point out when I see things more in usually both, and when I see things in men, and that's where it becomes more of an issue. Because if passive aggression was just a female thing, which it is a female thing, women tend to utilize passive aggression more than men do. I'm going to explain why that is in a moment. But if it was just women doing it, then I'm going to be talking about it because I'm not a woman, and I understand that women and men are different. And again, in a moment, I'm going to explain why I wouldn't be talking about it if it was just women. I want to eliminate passive aggression specifically coming from men, because this is one of the big reasons why our society is becoming more feminized and more weak and more soft, because men are becoming feminized, weak, and soft. I don't mind a woman being feminine, weak, and soft, because generally I prefer women to be that way. All right, I don't need a woman to be quote unquote strong. I don't need a woman to be tough. I don't need a woman to be masculine. I don't need a woman to be aggressive, and I don't need a woman to behave as if she is raging with testosterone. I prefer they not, personally. But for men to be behaving like a woman, as in having estrogen, being feminine, weak, soft, and passive aggressive, this is not good for my personal preference. Is also not good for society. So I'm doing a societal, I'm giving to society by doing this episode, as I do with all the other 3,000 episodes of this show. Now, when I did my series, which was not too long ago, let me tell you what series that was. That was episode number 3224, which was the beginning of a 5-part series that was titled Men Stop Being Pussies. I did a 5-part series on why men are being pussies. And a lot of things that I talked about in that series are going to be revisited in this series. Not completely and not directly, because if it was the same thing, then I wouldn't need to be doing this series. But a lot of the things that I talk about when I say men are being pussies is that there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior coming from men these days, to the point that it has become codified and accepted in society. See, if it was just a handful of men doing these things, I might talk about it, but not in the same way that I'm talking about it here. I'm talking about this in a generalized way, because I'm noticing this becoming a generalized, accepted way of behaving amongst males. And it troubles me because it's going to hurt society in general, not just bother me personally. Again, if it was just bothering me personally, I might still talk about it. But this is a more bigger picture societal issue. So when I talk about the feminization of society, and this is something that I have discussed in, first of all, episode 2457, I talked about the feminization of society. I did a 6-part series on the feminization of sports starting in episode number 2200. And I talked about the worst traits of feminized men in episode number 2039. So when I talk about the feminization of society, also when I talk about feminism itself, I talked about how to end feminism back in episode number 3346, not too long ago. In every episode, when I talk about how men are generally failing our society these days, and feminism is one way that men are failing society, feminism is not a failure of women. Feminism is women being women, and is men failing to shut the shit down. That's why I did that episode in 3346. One thing that I've commonly brought up is this pernicious habit of passive aggression. specifically, again, from males. Now, I expect passive aggression from women. I expect a woman to be passive aggressive when she is upset, angry, frustrated, anxious, etc. I expect some form of passive aggression. Why? Because women are wired differently from men as a general rule, and they have different capabilities from men when it comes to communication, also when it comes to physicality. I do not like nor respect passive aggression from a man. I would rather a man just be direct and clear in what he wants, what the thing is about, what point he wants to get across. Even if it's something that he thinks may be disappointing or disturbing, I'd rather the man just get it across clear. And because being direct is a discipline in and of itself. That's another reason. It makes you a more dominant presence in life in general when you're just a more direct person. So what I'm going to do here in this 4-part series is I'm going to break down how we do this and get rid of passive aggression just in general as a society. And this is each one teach one. So if I can get a few men to change their behaviors through these points, and I'm going to point out here, if you find yourself being guilty of these, I'm going to explain to you how and why you're guilty and what to do about it. Then we can change all society. But it starts, as they say, the journey of a million miles begins with a single step. Point number 1. Today's topic, once again, is how to kill passive aggression. Number 1, stop procrastinating on a no. And when I say no, I mean N-O. There's a rapper by the name of Chuck D from a group called Public Enemy, which was very popular several decades ago. He had a song called No. And he said the easiest and the hardest word to say is no. It only has two letters, only takes a second to say it. If the answer is no, just say no. That's the point number 1. The answer is no, just say no. Keep it moving, leave it at that. Years ago on ESPN, they used to have these commercials that were called This Is Sports Center. And they were funny little vignettes. They would take the guys who were on the Sports Center TV show, people like Kenny Mayne and Stuart Scott, and a lot of the people, Robin Roberts, these people who would actually be on the show, doing the show, the sportscasters. And these guys and girls were famous because everybody was watching ESPN at this time. This was ESPN's heyday. And they would get some famous athlete to come and do the commercial with them. And the athlete would be doing something funny. Like once there was a vignette of Floyd Mayweather, and he was hitting a punching bag. And on the front of the punching bag, the part of the bag that Floyd was actually hitting, there was a picture of a guy. I believe it was, what was this guy's name? I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Kenny Mayne. No, it might not have been Kenny Mayne. It was another sports pro. I can't remember the guy's name. It was a guy from ESPN. Man, I can't remember his name. It's escaping me right now. Let me look it up because it's important that I get this guy's name right. So it was ESPN, Floyd Mayweather. I think it was maybe Brian Kenny. Let me see. Yes, Brian Kenny. So it's a guy named Brian Kenny on ESPN. And Floyd came on ESPN to talk about boxing. Why don't you fight this person? Why don't you fight that person? And this guy, Brian Kenny, was being a little bit confrontational with Floyd about, why don't you fight Pacquiao or fight this person? And Floyd was basically arguing back and forth with this guy. It was a very entertaining segment, Floyd and this guy arguing with each other on ESPN. And you can go look this up. It was actually a very funny segment if you want to recall it. This probably happened, what year was this? This is probably 2008. 2009, something around that time. And later on, there was an ESPN commercial of Floyd hitting the punching bag, and the picture on the bag was of this guy, Brian Kenny. And Brian Kenny worked at ESPN. And the setting was not a gym, but it was the ESPN studio. It was just a punching bag in the middle of it, and Floyd Mayweather hitting the punching bag. And Brian Kenny walks by, and he sees his picture on the bag. And he's like, hey, Floyd, what's up? And Floyd was like, hey, Brian, what's going on? And just acting like nothing was happening. So it was just a funny little clip. Then there was another one where there was a guy. Who was this guy? This guy's name was, now I'm forgetting these guys' names, even though I'm picturing his face. I think his name was Scott something. I can't remember his last name. He was one of the ESPN anchors. And he's sitting in like this cubicle, big room full of cubicles. And he's sitting at this really large, well, actually not a large. He's sitting at his desk doing some work. And then there's a cubicle next to him with this regular office chair. And LeBron James walks in his Cleveland Cavaliers uniform. And he's like, hey, Scott, or whatever this guy's name is. I forget the guy's name. He's like, hey, Scott. And Scott's like, hey, what's up, LeBron? And LeBron sits down in his office chair, and he like sinks down into the chair, and the chair is leaning back, and LeBron is clearly uncomfortable with the chair because LeBron's a big guy, and his chair is a little bit too small for him. And he looks over at Scott, and Scott is sitting in this big throne, like this big royal throne. Clearly, it was supposed to be LeBron's chair because LeBron was, at that time he came out, he called himself King James. So the king's throne was supposed to be LeBron's chair, but Scott is sitting in that chair, and LeBron's not. And LeBron says, "Hey Scott, did you just happen to switch chairs with me?" And Scott says, "No, not me." And then LeBron's like, "Oh, okay." And they go back, and the show just continues. I'm bringing all this up to tell you the one that I meant to bring up, the one that I wanted to tell you about, which was Tiger Woods. Now, Tiger Woods is walking through the ESPN offices, and he walks past this guy named Stuart Scott, Stuart Scott was a black guy, one of the most famous sportscasters in ESPN's history. And Stuart, he passed away probably in his early 40s from cancer. And Stuart Scott, he walks by, he sees Tiger, he says, "Hey, Tiger." And Tiger's like, "Hey, Stuart." And he said, "Hey, do you want to sponsor our go-kart team or something like that? It's going to be this and this and this. It's going to happen on this day." And Tiger looks at him for a second. He thinks about it. And this is really quick. He looks at it for a second, thinks about it, he says, "No." And he just turns and walks away. He doesn't give any explanation at all. He just says no, and he just walks away. And it's really funny because Stuart Scott is just standing there like dumbfounded, because it's not normal for a person to be asked the question, say no, and just walk away with no explanation. But this is exactly what I'm telling you to do. If the answer is no, just say no and just keep it moving. And a lot of people have a problem doing this. One, because it's very rare to even see someone do it. So if you go look up the This Is Sports Center commercials, and as a matter of fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to look up, there probably is there should be a whole montage of all the This Is Sports Center commercials put together. There is, let's see, I'm looking at it right now. So there's a video that says the 40 best Sports Center commercials of all time. That's an 18-minute video. I'm going to watch that one. And then there's another one, the best Sports Center commercials. This one is 13 minutes. It has 8 million views. I'm going to look at this one too later on. The whole point here, folks, is if the answer is no, just say no. So many people are so used to getting an explanation when the answer is no, instead of just getting a clear no, that it feels abnormal to do it to anybody else. But the faster you get it communicated, the less opportunity you give to another person to question it or to try to change your mind. So when Tiger Woods said no to Stuart Scott, he just turned around and kept walking. He didn't give Stuart Scott a chance to respond to the no. He just walked away. If you give people anything other than a no, especially if they happen to be a very persistent person or they're good with words, you are giving them an opening to keep going and keep prying and possibly turn that no into a yes that you don't want to become a yes. And if you're dealing with a very persistent person who is good with words, they can pretty much find a way to talk you into anything. And if you give people anything other than no, again, you're giving them a chance. And if they happen to be better at the game than you, you're going to end up losing. Everybody has experienced this. Anytime you have made the mistake of not being clear when your answer was no, but you didn't say no. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is how we kill passive aggression. This is first of a 4-part series. Number 2, saying that you're okay when you're not okay. Now, it is often coming from women that will say that she is fine or okay when you know that she's not. It's obvious in her body language or in her energy. But men do this as well, sometimes using completely different language, but it's the same effect. What I'm suggesting here is that you don't say you're okay or that things are okay if you actually aren't, and instead just say what the actual issue is. And I'm talking specifically to the men with this one right here. Also with the men on the first point. If I'm also including women in a point, I'll say it. But I'm talking really to men here in this whole series. If you're not okay or a situation is not okay or there's something that's bothering you, you need to just come out of your mouth and say what the actual issue is. Again, similar to what I said in the first point. If the answer is actually no, just say no. The faster and more clearly you get to the point and get that point across, if it needs to be addressed, the stronger the message comes across, the more likely other people will get the point, and the higher the likelihood that the actual issue that needs to be addressed actually gets addressed rather than buried, suppressed, and or finding ways to leak out of you in passive aggressive behavior that nobody ever actually deciphers. And people see the behavior and it seems passive aggressive, but people can't really tell because it's just leaking out in little things and nobody knows what's really going on because nobody's being direct. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, a friend of mine, I was in a group chat and I made a joke at the expense of a friend of mine. There's a bunch of people in this group chat, probably 7, 8, maybe 10 people in the group chat. I didn't even know all the people, but I came in, made a joke, and it was apparent later on I found out that the person who the joke got made about, that I made, the person didn't like the fact that I made the joke. And it wasn't even that it wasn't the first time the joke had been made, but I guess this person didn't like the joke being made in front of present company, whoever those people were. I guess he was somebody to those people that he didn't want to be joked about, whatever, which I didn't know about. Now, this person didn't say anything to me, but over the next several days, and maybe it took about a week or two, this person the same person who I made the joke about, they started showing some passive aggressive behavior towards me. And I didn't understand where it was coming from. This person just started using a certain tone and certain language towards me. And this is all in text messages because we had this big text message chain that was going on. This person was in text messages is using a certain tone to me that seemed aggressive, but I couldn't tell exactly what it was for or where it was coming from. I didn't know what the hell was going on. So after this has happened, maybe about 2 or 3 exchanges in the group text from this person, I said, something is not making sense here. Now, the type of person that I am, I'm a very direct type of individual. I'm the type of person who, if there's an issue between me and somebody else, I'm going to get as direct as I can with you. Either I'm going to talk to you in person, or I'm going to talk to you on the phone, and we're going to settle whatever the issue is. I don't do it through text messages, not emails, none of that shit. I'm getting as direct as possible with you. Number 1 is in person. Number 2 is on the phone. So I called this guy on the phone. This person who was showing this passive aggressive behavior towards me. And when I get this person on the phone, they like, what's up? And I said, what's going on? What's up? And they already knew why I was calling. And it was clear this person had something on their mind that they wanted to get off. Because as soon as I said, what's going on, they started unloading on me and basically yelling at me and being mad at me for whatever they thought I had done. Now, this person's unloading, and I'm trying to get a word in edgewise to start a dialogue here. The person basically unloaded on me for about 2 minutes. And then this person, I will say it was a man, they hung the phone up on me. They hung the phone up and didn't say anything. So after they hung the phone up on me, I called back, they didn't answer the phone. So no conversation actually happened, but they did get, whatever was on their chest off their chest. I then went into the group text where I knew I could get a response there because everybody could see what was going on. And I said some things in the group text directed at that same person who had just hung up on me to let them know, like, what you just did was some bitch ass shit. Like, that was some pussy shit. When I say men stop being pussies, this is one of the things that I mean. And the reason why this man was being a pussy is not because of his unloading on me, but for several reasons. Number 1, whatever I had said previously in the group chat that bothered him, he never brought it up. He never said, I got a problem with what you said or how you said it or where you said it. He never said anything to me. And this person has direct access to me. He has my direct number. Number 2, that after several days of the passive aggression coming out, and clearly it was obvious the passive aggression was there, I had to call him to find out what was going on. Because if he's the one who had the issue. He never called me and said, yo, this is the issue. And number 3, when I did call him and get direct with him, the first thing he did was yell and scream. And he didn't scream, but he unloaded on me, or you could say cuss me out, I guess. And then he hung the phone up before I had a chance to say anything back. All right, this is all pussy behavior. All 3s add up to some pussy behavior. And this person, if they're listening, they know who they are. And I said all these things directly to this person when we finally did have a conversation. And they know that I did. So this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. This is what happens when I'm saying all this here for point number 2. Don't act like everything's okay if it's not okay. All right, just say what the fuck is on your mind. And I'm talking specifically to the men. Because all of these passive aggressive behaviors start to leak out of you. And what makes these situations worse is often most of the people, most men that I come across are not like me. Most men are not direct in such a way that they know that there is some type of someone is uncomfortable somewhere and they're going to call that person out and make them say what's making them uncomfortable. Most people are not going to force the conversation. I will force the conversation. If I feel like there's something that needs to be said, you ain't saying it, let's have a conversation. Most men don't do that. So what you get is a whole bunch of passive aggression going on from everybody and nobody saying anything. And this is how you get problems, long-term problems, because nobody addresses the small thing when it's still small. And the person who ends up losing the most when things like this happen is you. And why do you lose? Because first of all, you're the one who has the issue. So if you have an issue and you don't say anything, you end up losing because number 1, you had the issue, you never said anything. Number 2, you never let anyone know that there was an issue. And number 3, since most people are bad at perception, you can't expect people to pick up on your passive aggression. I can pick up on people's passive aggression because I'm a very perceptive person. I pay attention to human communication and human psychology. It's one of the things that I study. So I notice it in people. Most people don't notice it because most people ain't paying attention. So people don't notice these small things that are leaking out of you. And 4th, most people don't have the communication skills nor the confidence to address it when it's clear that somebody has a problem. Most people, if they notice somebody else has a problem and it's clear that there's a problem coming out of another person, most people will not address it directly because they don't want to deal with the negative emotions that may come out of the person who is about to speak if you ask them the right question. See, if I notice that it's clear you have a problem and you're not saying anything, I'm going to ask you to say what the problem is and let your feelings, thoughts, opinions, whatever it may be, I'm going to ask you to let those things out. Most people are not going to ask you that because they don't want to deal with whatever you might say. They don't even know what you're going to say. They don't want to deal with it, so they won't ask. And this is how the passive aggression just keeps going and going and going around in a circle. And eventually you send enough passive aggression out to others. Eventually they start sending it back to you. Now you got this whole cycle of everyone being passive aggressive with each other. Nobody's addressing it. And the situation just gets worse. All right. This is how it happens. And this is how you get a whole circle of bitch assness happening in your environment. And this happens with men. This happens amongst men. This is not a female thing. This is just normal behavior for females to be passive aggressive and catty with each other. But men, this shouldn't be happening. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how we kill passive aggression. Number 3, do not feign a lack of understanding in order to avoid responsibility. In other words, if something is your responsibility, don't act like you don't know what the hell is going on or what is supposed to be going on because you don't want to be held accountable. This is one that I see with women more than I see it with men. But again, the whole point here is that a lot of men have started to adapt the behaviors and the traits of females. That's the reason why I'm talking about it. Yeah, again, if it was only females doing this, I wouldn't be talking about it because this is just natural. These are natural things for women. It's when men start doing it that becomes a problem. I'm pointing it out to kill the passive aggression in males. So whether there is a responsibility attached to it or not, if you are unclear about something, you should say that you're unclear instead of pretending that you are clear just to appease an audience, whoever that audience may be. In other words, if you don't understand an instruction, get the instruction repeated back to you and tell them to say it slower this time. All right, say that same thing that you just said, but say it slower and say it in plainer language because you went over my head with what you just said. You as a man needs to be comfortable saying that to people. I don't understand what you just said. No, I do not get what you just told me. I need you to say it again. I need you to say it more slowly. I need you to dumb down your language so that I can understand you. You kind of went over my head. Often people will resort to this tactic of feigning a lack of understanding to avoid responsibility when they never wanted to be involved or responsible for the situation in the first place. They never wanted to be involved. So they are feigning as if they didn't understand. And maybe they really didn't understand. And this is a bad communications on the person who communicated the instructions in the first place because you should have read the person didn't want to do it. Or you should have read, okay, how do I get this person engaged? Because they're not engaged. This is not going to work. See, this problem can be solved before it even becomes a problem. You're going to hear this one come up over and over again, what I just said. In this series, you'll hear that more than once. This can be solved before it becomes a problem by just doing what I told you to do with the second point, communicating a no answer when the answer is actually no. Communicating where you stand when you are clear that that's where you stand. It doesn't have to be about no. It could be yes. It could be whatever it is. Just communicate. That way you don't have to worry about this coming up later on down the line and being a bigger problem. That's how things usually become bigger problems, so people don't communicate properly. So let's recap today's class. This is part 1 of our 4-part series, how to kill passive aggression. Point number 1, stop procrastinating on a no. The answer is no, just say no. The easiest word to say is the hardest word to say. It's only 2 letters. Number 2, stop saying you're okay when you're not. All right. Again, there's often a woman who say I'm fine or I'm okay, but men do this. They don't say anything. They just leak out in passive aggression what their real problem is instead of just coming clear and having a direct conversation. And a lot of men are becoming less and less direct these days. I blame us being able to communicate through smartphones more than we communicate in person as one of the reasons for this. And on top of that, just men acting more like females. And number 3, feigning a lack of understanding to avoid responsibility. This is often the fault of the person who is handing out responsibility, because if you had been paying attention from the beginning, you would have noticed that this person didn't want to be engaged the way that you had them engaged. And had you noticed that, then you wouldn't even have the problem that you have right now. So all that said, folks, tomorrow we're going to get into part 2 of this series. But before I let you go, I remind you, work on your game and work on your game university. This is all about taking discipline and channeling it through a process and a system into dominance. You want to turn discipline into dominance. You already got the discipline. You already have the skills. You already have the work ethic. You already are putting in the time. You want to turn it into dominance, into real measurable results. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all